Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, the bustling streets of downtown buzzed with life. Amid glittering shop windows and elegant passers-by, the Chandler and Company jewelry store, renowned for its rare and expensive pieces, attracted its usual crowd of wealthy customers. Among them, Maya Johnson, a black woman in her 30s, entered with understated grace. Her understated yet refined dress, impeccable shoes, and upright carriage revealed a quiet confidence. She wasn't there to loiter, but with a specific purpose, to find a unique necklace for a very special birthday dinner. As soon as she entered, eyes turned toward her. Some curious, others suspicious. The head saleswoman, a blonde woman with a fixed smile, followed her with barely concealed suspicion. When Maya politely asked to see a necklace set with blue sapphires, the saleswoman hesitated, before complying with a curt gesture. A few minutes later, as Maya was examining the details of the jewel, a murmur ran through the store. A diamond bracelet was missing from a display case. The employees exchanged glances laden with innuendo. Without waiting, the store manager called security. In front of all the customers, Maya was arrested and accused of theft. The security guards asked her to open her bag. She initially refused, outraged by this public humiliation. But their brutal insistence, under the accusing gaze of the other customers, forced her to give in. Nothing. No trace of the missing bracelet. Yet the suspicion remained, hanging in the air like a silent verdict. Maya, her face dignified despite her shame, stared at her accusers and said in a calm voice, "You really don't know who I am, do you?" Little did they know that her husband, David Leroy, was one of the most powerful and respected lawyers in the country, and that this accusation would spark much more than a simple misunderstanding. The shop suddenly fell silent, as if frozen in time. The customers, who had been admiring the jewelry behind the glass cases, had turned to Maya. Their judgmental gazes weighed on her shoulders like invisible chains. The store manager, a tall man with slick-back gray hair, stepped forward purposefully. "Madam, we know the bracelet was here just a few minutes ago. You're the only one who approached this display case. Open your bag immediately." Maya took a deep breath, trying to remain calm despite the indignation boiling inside her. "I didn't steal anything. And you have no proof. If you think I'm guilty just because I got close, you're sorely mistaken." The blonde saleswoman, still standing behind the counter, said with an ironic smile, "It's always the same. They come, pretend to have the means, and that's it." A murmur of approval was heard from two customers watching the scene, but also embarrassed looks from others. The tone was rising. The security guards, two imposing men in dark suits, stepped forward. One of them grabbed Maya's bag without her consent and roughly emptied it onto a glass table. The items rolled out, her wallet, her keys, a notebook, a lipstick. But no bracelet. "It doesn't mean anything," exclaimed the saleswoman, red with anger. "She could have hidden it somewhere else, in her jacket, or even passed it on to someone else." Maya lifted her chin, her dark eyes shining with a flame of dignity. "I have nothing to prove to people who humiliate me without just cause. But know one thing, this scene will not go unchallenged." The manager sneered, thinking he had the advantage. "Oh yeah? And what are you planning to do, call a lawyer?" A tense silence followed. Maya gave a small smile. "Better than that. You'll understand very soon." Maya's belongings were still scattered across the glass table. The saleswoman, frustrated at finding no evidence, crossed her arms and shrugged, but her eyes remained accusing. The manager turned to the security guards. "Hold her back. We'll call the police. She must have hidden that bracelet somewhere." Maya, indignant but still upright, calmly took out her phone. "Perfect. Let's call them. But first, let me tell my husband." A snicker was heard in the shop. "Yes, that's it, call your husband. Maybe he'll come and cry to get you out of there," said a customer, visibly amused. Maya didn't answer. Her fingers dialed a number she knew by heart. A few seconds later, a deep, calm but firm voice came through the receiver. Maya? Just at the sound of his voice, she felt her heart calm down. David. I'm at Chandler and Company jewelry store. They're falsely accusing me of theft. In front of everyone. They want to call the police. A tense silence fell on the other end of the line. Then David's voice became lower, but filled with suppressed anger. Don't move. I'm coming. Maya slowly put her phone away, before looking at her accusers. You just made the worst mistake of your life. The manager burst out laughing. Oh, really? We'll see about that when the police get here. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, David Leroy, a renowned lawyer, winner of several high-profile trials and a respected figure in the civil rights movement, was storming out of his office. His name was well known not only in the legal world, but also in political and media circles. And no one in that shop had the slightest idea who the man they would soon see walking through the door was. Tensions in the jewelry store were at their peak. Maya, still surrounded by security guards, maintained her haughty demeanor despite the increasingly loud murmurs of customers. The manager, satisfied with his authority, kept repeating to the employees. Keep her here. The police should be here soon. The saleswoman approached with a venomous smile. You know, madam, if you had simply admitted your fault from the start, we might have been lenient. Maya held his gaze with icy dignity. It's not me who is to be pitied in this story, but you. You don't know who you're attacking. At that precise moment, the jewelry store door burst open. An immediate silence fell over the room. David Leroy entered, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his imposing figure commanding everyone's attention. His piercing eyes scanned the room with an intensity that chilled several employees. He didn't need to raise his voice. His mere presence commanded respect. Where is my wife? He asked in a deep, firm voice that echoed in the heavy silence. Maya, relieved, took a step toward him. But one of the security guards blocked her path. Bad idea. David stared at him coldly, and the man, intimidated, immediately stepped back. David took Maya's hand, then turned to the store manager. Explain it to me. Right now. The man, a little destabilized but still sure of his authority, replied. Your wife was caught near a shop window with a piece of jewelry missing. We have every reason to believe she is guilty. We have contacted the police. A cold smile played on David's lips. Guilty? You are holding and publicly humiliating my wife, without proof, in front of witnesses. Do you even know who I am? The manager shrugged, annoyed. So what? It doesn't matter who you are. The law is the same for everyone. A glint flashed in David's eyes. Perfect. So let's talk about the law. I am Master David Leroy, a federal attorney specializing in discrimination and abuse of power cases. And I can assure you that this scene, he pointed to the crowd of shocked customers, will cost you much more than this missing jewel. A shudder ran through the jewelry store. Some customers, who had been sniggering a few minutes earlier, lowered their heads in shame. The saleswoman, however, paled. And at the same moment, the doors opened again. 2 policemen had just entered. The 2 police officers strode confidently through the door, their impeccable uniforms and hard stares reinforcing the tense atmosphere. All the customers fell silent, as if awaiting a final verdict. There you go, officers, said the store manager with relief, it's her. This woman stole a diamond bracelet and refuses to admit it. Maya remained motionless, her face serene but dignified, while David, still at her side, crossed his arms and stared calmly at the police officers. Madam, open your pockets and your bag once again, ordered one of the officers. David stepped forward, placing his hand on his wife's shoulder, as if to remind her that he wasn't going to leave her alone. No. She won't do anything more. You have no evidence, and this illegal public search is already a blatant violation of her rights. If you insist, I will sue you, this store, and anyone else involved in this charade. The police officers exchanged a surprised look. "And you are?" asked one of them. David slowly took out his wallet and held out his business card. "Mr. David Leroy. Federal attorney. Specializing in discrimination cases. And I assure you, this scene will be in the newspapers tomorrow morning if you continue to treat my wife like a criminal without a single shred of evidence." An icy silence followed. The policeman, uneasy, read the card, then looked up at David, suddenly less sure of himself. "Master Leroy. It's not what you think. We're just doing our job." David raised his voice slightly, controlled but sharp as a blade. "Your job? Your job is to uphold the law, not to be a tool for racist and baseless accusations. If you arrest my wife without evidence, I will immediately file a complaint for wrongful arrest and violation of her dignity. And believe me, I don't lose these kinds of cases." The customers present, who had been silent witnesses until then, began to whisper. Some took out their phones, filming the scene. The store manager paled, realizing that the situation was getting out of hand. Maya, for her part, finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Gentlemen, I have nothing to hide. But it's not up to me to prove my innocence. It's up to you to prove my guilt. And you have nothing." One of the police officers, visibly embarrassed, nodded. "Mr. Leroy. Madam, it is clear that we do not have enough evidence to make an arrest. We will close this case." The saleswoman, pale, burst out. But she took it, I'm sure of it." David turned to her, his piercing gaze silencing her. "So maybe you should check your own inventories, before accusing respectable customers." At the same time, an employee, who had been silent until then, timidly approached the manager. "Sir. I checked the surveillance cameras. The bracelet was not stolen. It was removed earlier this morning by one of our colleagues for an expert interview." An emotional uproar rippled through the room. All eyes turned to Maya and David. The injustice had been exposed. The silence that followed the employee's revelation was heavy, almost unbearable. All eyes turned to the store manager and the saleswoman, whose faces were slowly losing all color. The customers, meanwhile, whispered, some still filming the scene on their phones. David stepped forward, his tall stature and chilling calm commanding respect. He placed his hand on Maya's shoulder, then scanned the room. "So here's the truth. Before even checking your own inventories, you took the easy way out, accusing a black woman. You humiliated her in front of everyone, you searched her like a criminal, you tried to restrain her by force. And all this, why? Because in your eyes, a woman like her doesn't belong here." The saleswoman tried to stammer out an excuse. I didn't want to." But David raised his hand and his voice rose, echoing throughout the jewelry store. "No. You didn't want to. You chose. You chose distrust over respect, humiliation over service. And today, you have just exposed to everyone here what discrimination means in its clearest form." The police officers stared at the ground, uncomfortably. The officer in charge tried to regain his composure. "Master Leroy, this is a misunderstanding. Allow me to." David cut him off abruptly, his sharp gaze piercing his own. "A misunderstanding? It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a public, deliberate, and unfounded accusation. You have trampled on my wife's dignity. And I assure you, this will not go unpunished. You will hear about me in the courts and in the newspapers." The customers clapped softly, some nodding in agreement. An elderly woman approached Maya and took her hand. "You don't deserve this, my dear. Stay strong." Maya, moved but still dignified, squeezed his hand in return. David continued, calmer but just as sharp. "Today you tried to teach my wife a lesson. But you're the one taking home yours. The next time you see a black customer walk through that door, remember this day. Remember the price of your prejudice." Then, in a firm voice, he concluded. "Maya, come on. We have nothing more to do here. He gently took her hand, and together they left the jewelry store, leaving behind a crushing silence, faces red with shame, and a shattered reputation. As soon as the jewelry store door closed behind Maya and David, the customers inside began to speak aloud. Some, still in shock, shook their heads in disapproval. Others, outraged, continued to film the scene, detailing on their cell phones the injustice they had just witnessed. "It's unbelievable, they humiliated her for nothing," said a young man, his phone in his hand. "I'm posting this right away. People need to see what happened," replied a customer live on social media. Within minutes, the videos were circulating online. On Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, the hashtags #JusticeForMaya and #ChandlerRacist began appearing. The footage clearly showed Maya, calm and dignified, facing the hasty accusations, and then David revealing his identity as a lawyer. Maya's dignity contrasted sharply with the manager's arrogance and the saleswoman's nervousness. Outside, David and Maya paused for a few moments. Maya, moved, took her husband's hand. "Thank you, David. Without you, I don't know what they would have done to me." He looked at her with tenderness mixed with anger. "You should never have gone through this. But trust me, Maya, what happened today is going to cost them dearly. Not just legally, but publicly." And he was right. Because that very evening, several local news channels broadcast the amateur videos taken by the customers. Online newspapers headlined, "Black woman wrongly accused at luxury jewelry store, her husband, a federal attorney, confronts management." The wave of indignation rose quickly. Hundreds of comments poured in. "Ashamed. If her husband wasn't a lawyer, imagine what would have happened." This is why we are still talking about systemic racism in 2025. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the jewelry store was completely different. The manager was yelling at his employees. "How could you forget that the bracelet had been sent for examination? Do you realize what a disaster this is going to be?" The saleswoman, with tears in her eyes, tried to justify herself. I really thought she took it." But no one was listening to him anymore. The store's phone rang off the hook, flooded with angry calls from customers demanding explanations, while online, Chandler and Company's reputation was crumbling minute by minute. By the next morning, the footage had already spread across the country. National television stations replayed the jewelry store scene over and over again, Maya humiliated, David posing as a federal attorney, and the revelation of the misunderstanding. Social media, inflamed, turned the incident into a symbol of persistent discrimination in luxury establishments. Sitting in their living room, Maya and David watched the news. Maya still found it hard to believe how bad it all had gotten. "David, I never wanted to become the face of a national scandal," she said softly. He took her hand with quiet assurance. "You didn't choose anything, Maya. But they chose to humiliate you. So now we will choose to turn this hurt into justice." A few hours later, David called a press conference outside the federal courthouse. Reporters flocked, cameras and microphones at the ready. Maya, elegant but still scarred by the ordeal, stood by his side. David stepped up to the lectern, his determined gaze instantly capturing the crowd's attention. His voice, deep and measured, echoed. "Yesterday, my wife was wrongly accused of stealing from a luxury jewelry store. She was searched, humiliated, and detained in front of dozens of witnesses. All this without evidence, without verification, without respect. And why? Because she's black." A murmur rippled through the assembly. The camera zoomed in on Maya, whose dignified face reflected a quiet strength. David continued, even more firmly. "This case is not a simple misunderstanding. It illustrates a systemic problem. Too often, black women and men are judged guilty before anyone even bothers to check the facts. This is not just an attack on my wife's dignity. It is an attack on the dignity of an entire community." The reporters noted every word, some nodding their heads. "I am announcing today that we will continue the jewelry business Chandler and Company for racial discrimination, damage to reputation, and moral injury. But beyond the trial, we demand reforms. It is time for luxury establishments to stop treating black customers as suspects. Thunderous applause erupted among the civil rights groups who had come to support Maya. Camera flashes were popping. Maya, speaking timidly in turn, said in a soft but firm voice, "I don't want any more women to go through what I went through. No one should be treated like a thief just because of the color of their skin." The journalists, moved, relayed his words throughout the country. That day, the story of Maya and David was no longer just a news story, it became a movement. At Chandler & Company's international headquarters, located in a glass tower in New York City, the atmosphere was electric. The usually quiet and hushed meeting room echoed with strained voices and files being slammed onto the table. Regional directors, in-house lawyers, and the crisis communications team were in an emergency meeting. On the giant screen was a compilation of viral videos, Maya humiliated, David introducing himself as a federal lawyer, then the revelation that the bracelet had never been stolen. The CEO, an elegant man in his 60s, turned pale when he saw the images. "This is a disaster. We built our reputation on elegance and exclusivity, and now the whole country associates us with racism and public humiliation." A marketing manager tried to reassure. "We could issue an apology statement, portray the incident as an isolated mistake, and..." But the House's Attorney General shook his head. "It won't be enough. David Leroy isn't just any private citizen. He's a high-profile, respected federal attorney. He's already won several cases against powerful institutions. He won't give up. If we don't do something concrete, we're heading straight for disaster." The regional manager, responsible for the store where it all happened, was sweating profusely. "I assure you it was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" The CEO cut in sharply. "You let your employees humiliate an innocent customer in front of witnesses, and now we're on the front page of CNN, the BBC, and even the New York Times. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is an international scandal." Silence fell again. Finally, the communications director proposed. "We must act quickly. First, immediate suspension of the manager and the saleswoman. Second, a formal public apology from global leadership. Third, invite Maya and David to a private meeting to attempt mediation." The CEO, clenching his fists, finally nodded. "Do it. But know this, even with an apology, this man will sue us. And he holds all the cards." At the same time, at home, Maya and David received notification, Chandler & Company was issuing a public apology. But David, reading the carefully calibrated text filled with empty formulas, sketched a cold smile. "Do they really think an apology letter will be enough?" he said, putting the press release on the table. Then he looked at Maya with determination. "No, my dear. This is only the beginning." A few weeks later, the federal courtroom was packed. Journalists, civil rights activists, and even curious onlookers were present. The tension was palpable. This trial was not just about a baseless accusation, but a symbolic battle against discrimination and public humiliation. David Leroy, impeccably dressed, stood beside Maya. His expression was focused and calm, but every detail of his demeanor commanded respect. Maya, nervous but buoyed by her husband's presence, adjusted her dress and took a deep breath. The judge entered, and the hearing began. Chandler & Company's lawyer, a man in a bright red tie, quickly rose to present his defense. "Your Honor, this was just an unfortunate incident, an isolated misunderstanding. We acknowledge the error of our employees, but there was no intention to harm them." David then stood up, his gaze sweeping over the assembly. "Your Honor, this is not simply an incident. My client was publicly humiliated, searched without consent, and detained in front of dozens of witnesses solely because of her skin color. This is not a misunderstanding, this is an act of clear discrimination." He pulled out several files and photos. Images from viral videos, witness statements, and internal communications from the jewelry store were projected on the screen. The entire room could see the injustice clearly and undeniably. "We demand compensation for the damage suffered," harm to dignity, moral and reputational damage, and we demand guarantees that such acts will never be repeated in any of their stores, concludes David with indisputable authority. Witnesses called by the defense attempted to downplay the seriousness of the situation, but the evidence of the videos and the power of David's presentation left little room for dispute. Meanwhile, outside media broadcast live footage and key quotes from the hearing, amplifying the scandal and putting national pressure on Chandler and company. Maya, looking at her husband, felt a surge of relief and pride. She understood that this battle, though difficult, was becoming a symbol greater than just their personal matter, an example that justice could and should be done in the face of discrimination. The judge, impressed by the rigor and clarity of the evidence, announced the temporary suspension of the defense and the summoning of independent experts to assess the full extent of the damages. The legal battle had just begun, but the tone was set. Chandler and company could no longer ignore or trivialize this scandal. A few months later, the federal court delivered its verdict. The packed courtroom held its breath as the judge uttered the words that would go down in Chandler and Company's history. After reviewing the evidence, testimonies, and video recordings, it is clear that Ms. Maya Johnson was the victim of blatant discrimination and an attack on her dignity. Chandler and Company Jewelry is held liable for the moral and reputational damages suffered. Corrective measures and adequate financial compensation are ordered. A murmur of approval went through the assembly. David shook Maya's hand, and a small smile lit up their faces. Shortly after, the management of Chandler and Company issued an official statement, this time impeccable. We fully acknowledge the wrongdoing of our employees and publicly apologize to Ms. Maya Johnson and her family. Strict measures will be taken to train our staff and prevent future discrimination. We are committed to restoring the trust of our customers and the community. The media reported the verdict and the apology, and the hashtags #JusticeForMaya and #ChandlerRacist became a symbol of vigilance and the fight against discrimination in public places. In the privacy of their home, Maya turned to David. I never thought something so humiliating could turn into justice. He looked at her tenderly. It is proof that even in the face of injustice, dignity and courage always triumph. And so, what began as a public humiliation became a symbolic victory, not only for Maya and David, but for all people who face discrimination and hasty judgments. The lesson was clear: dignity cannot be begged for, it must be defended. And with courage and determination, even the most powerful can face their mistakes.